So we're starting part 2 of my adventure reading The Lord of the Rings for the first time. Now we're on to the Two Towers. I don't know why I did like a bunny hop of the Two Towers. We're rolling with it. 2 things. If you're here and you didn't watch the first one, you should probably just go back to that. I'll have it linked above and below. And I guess if you just want to hear my thoughts on the Two Towers and you don't want to hear my thoughts on the first book, The Fellowship, then keep watching. This is my first time reading these books. I really enjoyed the first one, so we're moving on to the second one, and I'm still doing this one as a buddy read. We have taken 2 weeks off, and I'm itching to get back into it because, it is one book in 3 parts, so it feels like I kind of left something unfinished, so I'm excited about that. What was the other thing? Oh, I just wanted to say, for the people who commented on it and answered some of my questions that I had while I was reading or gave me a little bit more background, I really appreciated that. It really added to the experience of reading it because I was able to read it and this is such a beloved book with people knowing so much about them and having so many opinions about it that hearing what you guys had to say and clarifying things for me really helped with the reading experience, and I'm taking all of that knowledge into reading the second book. So I think it was a cool experience for me getting to share a reading experience a little bit more than I usually do. And so yeah, we're gonna get started on reading The Two Towers. Finishing chapter 1, I could definitely see why they decided to include this one in the movies, in movie 1, because it really is closure of the Fellowship, because this is where Boromir dies, and then Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas choose to follow Merry and Pippin. It was very short and really felt more like closure than the last one, so I don't know why Tolkien decided to add it into book 3 when it does really feel like it should have been in book 2 more, but we will keep reading. I'm pretty behind on my buddy read, so that's kind of what today is going to look like. So we're going to have a lot of updates from this position in this shirt. Another thing which I don't think I mentioned in my last vlog is that I've been using the Lord of the Ring Project's interactive maps of Middle-earth because I normally don't pay much attention to the geography and when we're traveling books where we're going to, but with this one, I was it was being so well described, and I was getting kind of confused on where they were going, and so I wanted to understand the paths more, and I came across this, which I'm sure people know about. I'll put it up on the screen, for example, I'm at a point where the Fellowship is breaking up, so if I want, I can see Aragorn's path, and then I can also put Frodo and Sam's path on at the same time and kind of see where they diverge, and you can see the names of places and all of that. So it's pretty nice, and it's been really useful to my reading experience, so wanted to share. So I think we just found out that elf don't need to sleep. It's talking about Legolas, and it says, and he could sleep if sleep it could be called by men, resting his mind in the strange paths of elvish dreams, even as he walked open-eyed in the light of this world. So it's almost like he could meditate in his mind into another place while he's still moving, and that's all the sustenance he needs, which is interesting. First off, I would get up, but, this is the situation, so I'm not. So, Legolas, Gimli, and, Aragorn are, they met those, that group of riders, the Riders of Rohan, and they're chatting with them, and they said how far they went when it was 45 leagues. So I looked that up, and that's 155 miles, and they did that in 4 days, which, hold on, I did the math. They did over 38 miles a day. A dwarf did 38 miles a day. In the longest hike I have ever done, I did 22 miles, and it took forever, and I could, barely walk the next day. So, they've been walking a lot, so obviously they have some endurance, but still, that's crazy. Okay, this is now the current situation, but, and I'm in the same chapter. I'm in chapter 2 of this book, but I can't stopping because, like, I just keep, like, giggling and whatnot. So they're still talking to, like, the writers of Rohan, and they, like, said some shit about, like, the elvish lady, and Gimli was just like, and I will come too. The matter of the Lady Galadriel lies still between us. I have yet to teach you gentle speech. I just love how, sorry, she doesn't like hearing me talk. I just love how he's, like, turned around to the idea of elves and now loves elves, and this is my disgruntled cat. Oh, are you having a bad day because I'm trying to do updates? Okay, I just finished chapter 2, and that was following Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn. And I just looked at the chapter 3, and it looks like this one's going to be following Pippin and Merry, which means I'm assuming the next chapter is going to be following Sam and Frodo. So I imagine that the pace of this is going to feel a lot faster because everyone's split up and we're following multiple storylines. But I'm also really happy that this happened because I was worried that we were going to get only some perspectives and then a lot of it was going to be like things being explained to you at a later time and that the movies had just like meshed it together better. I'm pleased that this is how it was actually written. I just read the chapter with Pippin and Merry and the orcs and, like, them being taken and then them getting away. And I was, like, fairly indifferent to that scene in the movies. And I was, like, very pleasantly surprised by how intrigued I was by this. Just as I kind of talked about in my last vlog, I was hoping that they were going to have multiple storylines happening so you could follow different characters. So you're getting, like, to know the characters a bit more intimately, and I really liked this for Pippin because Pippin already had like a bit of personality on the page, but it also like pointed to hit a lot of his ingenuity, but it also kind of goes back to me being like, what's the point of Merry? For good and for bad, Pippin has been, of those two hobbits, the one with the most page time. Like, he kind of messes up sometimes, and then he has little quips where he's like, you know, being the youngest of the group and, like, kind of getting riled up. And then in this part, he does things very smartly. And Merry's just kind of a sidekick to him, which I'm hoping Merry gets a little bit more spotlight at some point. But I did look, because in my last clip, or a clip before or something, I said, like, I thought that it was going to be, like, you know, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas chapter, and then Merry Pippin chapter, and then Sam and Frodo chapter, and I was looking ahead, and we don't see Sam and Frodo until the next book, till the start of book 4, which is, like, part 2 of the Two Towers, and I'm, like, pretty bummed. Okay, another thing I like about these books that makes them feel more lighthearted is something about Tolkien's writing style. There's at one point a gash on Merry's face, and then he kind of says, like, it bothered him no more, but he held the scar for the rest of his days. Or there was this, the skirmish between the orcs and the riders of Rohan, and it said, so ended the raid, and no news of it ever came back to either Mordor or to Isengard, but the smoke of the burning rose high to heaven and was seen by many watchful eyes. There's just something about it where it kind of alludes to, like, the future, and when it does it with the people, it like insinuates that these people are going to live on in the end. And even at the end of the last chapter, when Merry and Pippin are getting away, in the way of halflings or in the way of hobbits, they just start talking about this adventure and, like, kind of were like, oh, you'll make it into Bilbo's book. And there's something, like, very lighthearted in nature about it while still having some sort of stakes that I really appreciate about it. The ends are just so charming. I love it. They're trying to figure out a word, and Pippin goes, hill, shelf, step, suggested Merry. Treebeard repeated the words thoughtfully. Hill, yes, that was it, but it is a hasty word for a thing that has stood here ever since this part of the world was shaped. Never mind, let us leave it and go. I I just really love that. So Merry and Pippin are with Treebeard, and they drink things as a form of sustenance that he's providing them, and I kept thinking, like, hobbits love to eat. How are they just drinking stuff? But then they eat some of the elven bread, not because they're hungry, but just because they think breakfast should have food involved, which I giggled at. I didn't expect these books to be so funny and, like, witty, and I spoke to it in my last vlog, but I'm just, like, chuckling pretty often, which I'm enjoying. Like, right now, Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn are trying to find the hobbits, and they're in the forest. And then Gimli goes, "Then what shall we do now? We cannot pursue them through the whole fastness of Fangorn. We have come ill-supplied. If we do not find them soon, we shall be no use to them, except to sit down beside them and show our friendship by starving together." Oh man, just the humor in these, while it's still having stakes and just like the gentleness is, I don't know, I just really wasn't expecting it, and I'm really enjoying that aspect. As if things couldn't get worse, the Black Riders now ride on winged beasts, so like that's great. I want to do a little bit more reading on Gandalf the White because he's appeared at this point, and someone commented last time about what Gandalf is and how he's the same thing as Sauron, but I don't remember the name for it. And he talks about how powerful he is, but he also doesn't remember people as well, or like a long time has passed for him since he was Gandalf the Grey as he became Gandalf the White. And he's like almost saying that he needs the ring to win this battle and is like tempted in some capacity to use it, which Gandalf the Grey never was. In talking about the ring, he says, "No, it has gone beyond our reach. Of that, at least, let us be glad. We can no longer be tempted to use the ring." But no one was tempted to use the ring anyway but him. So I'm interested in, like, his change in perception, and I don't think it's going to be explored much in here, but I'm sure it's, like, all over the internet. So I didn't realize that Saruman double-crossed Sauron, which I hate that those names are so similar. Saruman had aligned with Sauron, but then I thought that they were just like trying to destroy both forces, like Saruman's at Isengard and then Sauron's at Mordor in the movies. But now, upon reading the book, it's clear that Saruman wanted the power on his own and wanted the ring for himself and was kind of competing against Sauron, which is why they're destroying him first. So I like that that was clarified. I'm also hoping that the like Lady of Rohan and like the Aragorn thing doesn't happen the way it did in the movies, because it was just like really weird and awkward. They have like noticed each other, but I'm really hoping it doesn't lead to what it did in the movie, because I didn't really like that. I'm also curious how Arwen's gonna come into play, because there was like these weird scenes where you could just see Arwen's face over things in the movie, and I really didn't understand what was going on there, so I'm hoping that gets clarified, but I don't think that'll happen until the third part. Okay, so we were just at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and I actually don't remember this really from the movie at all, and I was trying to follow, and I just didn't really understood what happened. It kind of seemed like they were losing the battle, and then when, like, they felt that all was lost, like, the king dude just, like, came through with all of his horses and like all of his people who were still alive, and the orcs became like terrified for some reason, and then Gandalf showed up with some people, which I could understand. Like, now that we have more people, like with Gandalf, I could see why we would be able to defeat the orcs, but it just seemed kind of like good defeats evil, and we were so ready to go that they were afraid of us, and we just went into battle and conquered. I didn't understand it, and then I went to look at, like, SparkNotes versions types of the, like, plot summaries of that chapter, and it kind of said the same thing, so I don't think I was missing anything. Generally speaking with these books so far as I've read them, things fix themselves easily, but like there seems to be some sort of rationale behind it. But with this one, I just didn't really see the rationale. It just really felt like a good conquers evil type of thing. Okay, so I'm a little bummed that we didn't get to see the Battle of Isengard and we just got to see like the fallout of it, because the descriptions of like what the landscape looked like after the Ents fucked it up is so badass. And I'm like, I wish we actually were there and saw what happened. Although I will say that I think that of Tolkien's writing, the fight scenes are maybe like the thing about his writing I might like the least plot-wise. I think he's better in the quiet moments. So a lot of the Fellowship has been reunited, and Merry and Pippin are explaining the Ent attack on Isengard, and this is just an example of like what I really love about Tolkien's writing, even though this is like a kind of like a word vomit of a scene that already happened in the past, which isn't a literary choice I particularly enjoy. With Tolkien, I prefer this to him actively writing or describing war scenes or battle scenes. So I'm just gonna read a quote. It says, he's talking about Treebeard, and he says, this is after they've already kind of destroyed most of Isengard, and it's like, Treebeard began to pull down a bit more of the walls in a leisurely sort of way, just to amuse himself. So he's speaking to just like the sheer strength of Ents in that statement, but he's also kind of speaking to this like playfulness of them. And he does this really well, where I think like his sentences are descriptive in a way where it's portraying like multiple ideas at the same time, and while he is very descriptive, it just feels very intentional and purposeful. Okay, and I have an explanation for Helm's Deep now. So I was talking about this with Mariana in our check-in, and I was confused and she was also confused, but what she thought scared them was that there was trees that were on a hill and then the trees moved, and so suddenly the hill was bare. And I went back and reread the scene after she explained that that's what she thought happened, and I thought it was metaphorical when I read it. Like, it was like the people were on the hill and the people like moved off, and it like was like a group of trees doing it. But no, it was literally trees, and it was the horns, which I don't remember in the movies. That's not to say it didn't happen. And we learn about the horns, or however you say it, in the next chapter, which Treebeard kind of just confirmed that that's what happened. So she's definitely right, and yeah, sometimes you never know when to take Tolkien literally. Apparently you should always take his writing very literally. Being a wizard with a staff seems highly cumbersome, because once it breaks or someone takes it away, you're essentially useless. Also, I look like this because I'm backpacking and we're in a canoe that was left next to the lean-to out on the water. So I feel like with the Palantir, or like that orb thing that Pippin like went for and then like talked to Sauron unintentionally through, there's like this whole new lore that kind of opened up, because Gandalf talks about how Sauron didn't make this, like wizards didn't make this, and it came from like a different land, and then multiple lands were brought up, and I'm just like, I wonder where all of this is explored. Like, do I have to read the shit, I have a fly biting me. Do I have to read the Silmarillion to get a better idea of this, or is this just things that like Tolkien thought of that he never really dove into in any of the books? So just more thoughts on more. Just wanted to give you my view currently. Just looking out on the water. So Sam's talking about bringing his like his cooking gear, and how he's been lugging it all the way, and they haven't been able to make everything because they don't have food to cook with, and there's like no animals around. And I just have to think of like when this was supposed to take place and like what cooking gear looked like and how heavy it must be, because like nowadays you could have these little pocket rockets that are like this big that you could take into the backcountry and all you really need is fuel. But yeah, back then I'm imagining what this cooking gear would look like, and it'd be very cumbersome. Sam finally gets to use that stupid rope that he had been talking so much about. I don't mean to say his rope is actually stupid, because, like, I mean, if you're going on an adventure and you're going through mountains and stuff, you should probably have a rope with you, like, just in case. So Smeagol's now leading us through the marshes, and I just keep thinking about how Tolkien divided this book specifically this part, the Two Towers, where there's book 3 and book 4, and we follow, like, some characters for book 3, and then we follow Sam and Frodo and Smeagol for book 4. And if this was published now, I don't think that editors would have allowed him to publish it like this. It kind of creates, like, more of a push to keep reading when you're interjecting other people's chapters in between. So most sci-fi fantasy I see, or I've read now, the Sam Frodo chapters would have been interspersed within the larger party chapters, and you would have been bouncing back and forth, kind of like what they did in the movie. So yeah, that's just interesting, because I don't know how editing has really changed since then. I'm sure there was well, I shouldn't say I'm sure. Potentially there was less structure to it, which gave you more freedom as an author. But yeah, I don't think it would be published like this now. Okay, just another thing. It's something that you could see with like the interactive maps of Middle-earth, but where you can trace people's paths. But just reading book 3 and like just how fast back and forth Gandalf was racing on his horse, and then how fast the Ents brought Merry and Pippin, and then how fast Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn were getting places. Like, they were booking it. They moved so fast within the, like, leagues within the course of days. And like, you look at how far Frodo and Sam go, and, like, they're traveling so much slower. It's just, like, I mean, it makes sense, obviously. It's just funny when you see it mapped out, like, just how much slower and how much less geographic progress they're making. So Sam refers to like Smeagol, Gollum, and his head as Slinker and Stinker, and that's just like the most wholesome Hobbit way of referring to him, and it's completely adorable. I can see why so many people love Sam, because even when he's mad, it's in like this, like, I'm so mad I could withhold dessert from you. You know, it feels very harmless. I wish that Frodo had more personality. He's just, you never really know what's going on in his head, and sometimes it alludes to the ring, but you really have no idea how much of an impact it has on him. Just like, sometimes he has like this heaviness about him, which is like an interpretation that like the ring is causing him heaviness, although I don't think you need to interpret much there, because Tolkien's pretty direct with what he wants you to think, and he doesn't really use metaphor. It's very on the page. This is exactly what's happening. When he says the trees moved, he literally meant the trees moved. But yeah, I just kind of wish that there was a little bit more to Frodo, because there's not really anything to root for. He's like, I wouldn't even call him a main character. He just like, he's the guy who like happens to have the ring, and you get to see a lot more into Sam's head, which is why I think people like him more, because I mean, of the hobbits, Sam and Pippin are the most interesting. I mean, unless people disagree. I don't know. They have the most time on the page. They have the most dialogue. Their dialogue is more quippy. They're distinct from each other. There's definitely a sense of difference between them, whereas, like, Frodo could be Merry and Merry could be Frodo. Like, I don't know. So, I just finished the book and I have some thoughts. I didn't really check in much because the Frodo-Sam part was just not as interesting for me. Okay, another thing I want to talk about. Sam, when the spider attacks Frodo and he thinks Frodo's dead, he takes the ring from Frodo because he's like, I have to finish the quest. I'm the last of the fellowship. So then people come to, or orcs come to get Frodo, and Frodo is taken away, and then he follows them by putting on the ring, which I don't know if this happens in the movie, but I found that very interesting. And how he describes the experience of having the ring on has more clarity to it. There's like a more of a crispness, and there's not the fear that Frodo has. And he keeps the ring on for an extraordinarily long period of time, which also surprised me. So, I mean, I think it ends with Sam having the ring on his finger still because he needs to be hiding from these orcs, which I thought, based on the movies, that having the ring on makes you easier to find and draws you to the power, but I don't know if that's the case. I feel like that might just be a movie thing. So yeah, I just found that very interesting. And Sam's experience of the ring and how it's different from Frodo's when Frodo puts it on in the first book and then gets, like, cut. I mean, there was more fear involved in that scene, I think. But, yeah, I just found their experiences of the ring much different, and I was intrigued by that. I keep getting hung up on their relationship, and I know I talked about this in my first vlog, but, like, the term master that Sam uses for Frodo, and what that means in language now. So that means, like, you have some sort of subservient relationship. So that is how I'm assuming it. I looked up in the etymology of the word to see if it had a different usage before this, even because sometimes in the book people refer to someone as Master X, but it's not in a way where they feel below them or they think that they're below them. Faramir uses it to talk to Frodo at a certain point, and Faramir obviously is a higher standing than Frodo. But when I looked into it more, it was more like it was the precursor for Mr., so people would say, like, instead of saying Mr. something, they would say Master something, which I could appreciate to a certain extent, especially with how Faramir, did I say Boromir before? How Faramir interacted with Frodo, but that's always capitalized. Master Frodo, Master X, Master Y. In the other parts, there's parts where Sam refers to Frodo as his master, and it's lowercase, so it's not used as, like, an official term of recognition of standing or of, like, being proper with them. It seems more like a subservience thing. So I have a hard time with the painting of them as friends, and I really don't buy it, because the book 4, where it's just following Sam and Frodo, I just kept expecting their relationship to develop. I wanted to see what this friendship was, and Smeagol came into the picture very quickly, and there wasn't much dialogue between Frodo and Sam. There's, like, moments where Sam is caring for Frodo, and, like, there's, like, a few lines where Frodo genuinely laughs at something Sam says, but I don't feel like a friendship was built within the confines of this book. I also didn't like this book 4, the part we follow Frodo and Sam for, as much as I liked the previous part where we were following all of the other characters of the Fellowship. I found there was a lot more dynamics, obviously, because there's a lot more characters, a lot more, like, things were happening and events were happening, where this was just like more quest style. I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't as interested. I kind of wish that it was portrayed how it was in the movies, where these scenes would have been interspersed, so books 3 and 4, which make up the two towers, had been interspersed together, and we were kind of bouncing between everything, because I think that would have just made for better pacing. But I'm going to watch the movie, because I don't remember this movie as well as the first one, but there are events that occur, like the spider, and the Faramir, and things that Sam does that I didn't remember happening that way in my head, so I don't know if things were changed or if I just am not remembering correctly, but I'll check in after I watch the movie. Okay, let's talk, because I didn't just watch the movie. I watched the movie yesterday, and I am now in a hotel for work, and I had so many thoughts while watching that movie. So first off, it is incredibly different from the book. They changed multiple characters' motivations and multiple plot points, and they did cut. I find it interesting that for the first movie, they went through all of the first book, and then they took went a chapter into the second book. And then for this one, the second ones, they went from chapter 2 of book 3, and then cut off the last 2 chapters of book 4, and that was the whole second movie. So we didn't see the spider and like Gollum's betrayal in this movie. So they took even less plot and just kind of spread it out, and it really felt like that to me, because like the Ensign Isengard, Helm's Deep, like those were like 2 chapters apiece. It was like bang, 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 we're going through things. And this, it felt very like extended. The reason I don't think I remember as much from the movie, I'm going to change my angle. The reason I feel like I don't remember as much from this movie was, one, I didn't like the movie as much. And of the movies, I think it might have been my least favorite when I watched them before, but I really didn't like a lot of the things that they did with the movie, and the reason I didn't remember a lot of it as I was reading is because it was so different. Like, that wasn't even, like, the same plot for a lot of places, and I was reeling, and it's interesting because I watched the movies first. So typically when that happens, I have like an affinity for whatever I consumed first. I have an affinity for what I read the first time, but I was like much more into what happened in the books. But let's talk about the thing that I liked in the movies more. I liked the portrayal of Frodo more in the movies. I like that they showed Frodo's battle with the ring. I don't even know if it's like clearly intended to be that way in the books, because like there are times where he gets closer to Sauron's lair in Mordor, in this evil place, and he begins to feel this heaviness about him. But it seems more in proximity to Sauron than him having the ring take over his personhood, which is how it's portrayed in the movies. And I appreciate that more because it gives a bit more depth to Frodo as a character. I feel like in the books, Frodo is he's like a non-entity. Like you can kind of just like plop whoever in to his personality. And I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but like Frodo isn't the main character in my opinion. He's the chosen one, but that doesn't make him the main character. And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts about that. Thank God this wasn't in the book. The weird Aragorn thing, like what the hell is that? I hate that part of the movies. It took up so much time and it adds absolutely nothing. And just like they did increase like the king of Rohan and like Wormtongue, like their story's a lot bigger, and Éowyn, which I already said I could do without. I wish the movies had also left her behind in Rohan to like take care of things. The king is more of a douchebag in the movies than he is in the books.
I mean, maybe they're adding these things to create tension because things just kind of go our way in the books. Like, Gandalf's kind of like puppeting the strings of things. He's like blasting across the country, like making shit happen. And in the movies, he's not able to pull those strings. So I think that they just wanted to make more tension in places to make it more interesting. I don't know. Because I obviously found the book very interesting. Also, the weird Arwen scenes, like where we're like, I'm wondering with these Arwen scenes if they pulled them out of thin air or if there's something that's going to happen in the third one about her. I feel like something with her might happen in the third, but I mean, I have no idea. Oh my god, also, like, what the fuck? Why did they make Aragorn die? Like, what was that scene? What was the point in him dying, like, and then, like, falling into the water? Was it to, like, make Eowyn more, I don't know. It, like, we don't need, like, the fake death trope. We just don't need it. So, yeah, another one I didn't like. Also, the Faramir character arc was totally changed, which I was annoyed by, because in the books, Faramir doesn't give in to the evil of the ring like his brother did. It showed, like, their personality difference, and he was like, oh, it's the ring? Oops, sorry, let that slide, Sam. Here, let me, like, give you some provisions and send you on your way. And in the book, he's like, nah, bitch, I'm taking you captive. And then, like, sees Sam with the Wraith and is like, oh, or it's not Sam, Frodo with the Wraith, and then sees Sam, like, kind of attack him and grab Frodo and get him out of the way. Again, I feel like it was just trying to add tension. There's another word I want to use instead of tension, but I just keep saying tension. Anyway, yeah, I have feelings, obviously. And then, I'm not crazy. How I read this in the book is that Saruman double-crossed Sauron, and that's why they went to Isengard first, to make sure they could fuck things up, because their two enemies were no longer on the same side of things. And we just didn't do that? Éomer, like, was gone, and, like, the king had a son. Like, I just don't understand why they took these liberties and why they thought that would be the plot line that's interesting, because I found the banter between, like, Aragorn and Gandalf and, like, Merry, like, all of the main characters, all of the Fellowship, I found their banter to be one of my favorite parts of the book. Like, their playfulness and their gentleness towards each other, and, like, their love of each other and how they can poke fun with each other. I would have preferred to see their relationships built up more than having all of these random plot additions and plot changes that really change, like, the point of things that were occurring. I don't know. But anyway, I think I'm going to end this vlog here. It's probably longer than the last one. If you are still around and watching the end of this, thank you so much for being here. I'm curious to know your takes on some of these scenes, if you think different things happen than what I was perceiving occurring. I'm curious about your take on Frodo and Sam, like last time. And then the movie or the book. Like, what plot points did you prefer in the book versus the movie, and vice versa? And yeah, that's all I got. So until next time, happy reading.